The vault had not been opened in 27 years. Deep within Kensington Palace, behind layers of security that even most royal staff did not know existed, sat a locked steel box. Inside that box was a single document, handwritten and sealed with wax that bore the Prince of Wales insignia from decades ago. Only 3 people knew what the document contained: the king himself, the archbishop who had witnessed it, and now Prince William, who had finally decided it was time to break the seal. What was written on that single piece of paper had been a secret guarded more carefully than state intelligence, and more closely than any royal scandal. It was a promise made beside a coffin, whispered in the presence of death, sworn in a moment of raw grief that would haunt the king for the rest of his life. When Princess Diana's body lay in state, Charles had done something nobody knew about. He had written down promises about truth, his sons, and about secrets that had been buried with their mother. But time has a way of making people forget their promises or perhaps ignore them. What could Charles have possibly promised besides Diana's coffin? What truths had he vowed to reveal? And why, after nearly 3 decades, was William finally forcing those promises into the light? Stay close, because what you are about to learn will change everything you thought you knew about Diana's death, about the brothers who have barely spoken in years, and about the king who swore an oath he never intended to keep. Let's get started. The discovery that started everything. It began with a phone call that Prince William was never supposed to hear. He had arrived early at Clarence House for a scheduled meeting with his father about some upcoming royal duties. The meeting was routine, boring even, and just a review of the calendar and coordination of appearances. William let himself in through the private entrance, as he always did, and walked toward his father's study. That was when he heard Charles's voice, raised and agitated, coming from behind the closed door. William paused with his hand on the doorknob, and his instinct was immediately telling him something was wrong. Charles was speaking to someone on the phone, his tone sharp with frustration. "I told you that the document stays sealed, no exceptions. I don't care what the lawyers say about disclosure requirements. That promise was personal and it remains private." William's curiosity immediately turned to alarm as he thought to himself, "What document? What promise?" He stood frozen in the hallway, knowing he should announce himself but unable to move. Charles continued, his voice dropping lower but still audible. "If either of my sons ever learned what I wrote that day, it would destroy what little relationship we have left. Some truths are better left buried with the dead." William immediately felt his stomach drop. He backed away from the door quietly, with his mind racing, and left Clarence House without announcing he had been there at all. The meeting could be rescheduled, but right now he needed to understand what his father was hiding. He called his private secretary from the car and asked a careful question. "Is there any documentation in the palace archives from the week of my mother's funeral that would be restricted or sealed?" The secretary promised to look into it discreetly. William waited as his anxiety kept building with each passing hour. The response from his secretary came 2 days later. There was indeed a sealed document filed under the highest level of restricted access, dated 3 days after Diana's passing. The document was classified as a personal memorandum from the then Prince of Wales, witnessed by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and marked not to be opened except by written permission from Charles himself or by legal order following his death. William's secretary added that attempting to access the document without proper authorization would be nearly impossible, as the restrictions were airtight. William knew he could not simply demand to see it, because his father would refuse and probably destroy it if he felt threatened. He needed leverage, information, something that would force the king to open that vault. So he started digging quietly and carefully into the days surrounding his mother's death. He spoke with former staff who had been present at the palace during that awful week. He reviewed archived schedules and official logs. He even contacted the Archbishop, now retired, who had witnessed whatever Charles had written. The Archbishop refused to discuss details but confirmed that a document existed and that it contained vows Charles had made in the immediate aftermath of Diana's passing. Armed with this confirmation, William made a decision. He would approach his father directly, not with accusations but with a simple request. He wanted to see the document, He wanted to know what promises his father had made beside his mother's coffin that fateful day. And if Charles refused, William was prepared to take legal action to force his release. He was done with secrets and half-truths. His mother deserved better. He and Harry deserved better. The following confrontation happened on a gray afternoon in the King's private office at Buckingham Palace. William requested a meeting with no details about the agenda, and Charles agreed somewhat reluctantly. When William walked in, he got straight to the point without any pleasantries. "I know about the document you sealed after Mum died. I know you made promises. And I want to read what you wrote." Charles's face immediately went pale, then became flushed with anger and something that looked like fear. "How did you find out about that?" William did not answer the question. "Does it matter? It exists, you wrote it, and I have a right to know what you promised her." Charles stood and walked to the window with his back against William and his shoulders tense. Those were private thoughts written in a moment of grief. They were never meant to be read by anyone. William's voice stayed calm but firm. "Then why did you have them witnessed and sealed in a vault? If they were just private thoughts, you would have kept them in a diary or destroyed them. You made them official. You made them a record. That means they matter." Charles turned around. His expression conflicted between anger and guilt. "What I wrote was a promise to myself as much as to her, a reminder of things I needed to do and fix." William leaned forward. "Then show me. Prove you kept those promises or admit you broke them and deal with the consequences." The argument lasted over an hour as Charles tried every deflection and every excuse. The document was too personal, and it would cause unnecessary pain and dredge up old wounds better left alone. But William would not back down. He had made up his mind. Either his father willingly showed him the document, or William would take legal steps to force its release through the courts. Charles knew his son well enough to understand this was not a bluff. William had the determination and the resources to follow through, and a legal battle over a sealed document from Diana's death would create a media firestorm that would damage the monarchy beyond repair. Finally defeated and exhausted, Charles agreed. "Fine, you want to read it? We will go to the vault together right now, but understand this, William. Once you read what I wrote, you cannot unread it. Some of those promises involve truths about your mother that will hurt. Are you prepared for that?" William nodded without hesitation. "I have spent my entire life dealing with painful truths about my mother. One more will not break me. What will break me is living with secrets and lies." Charles stared at his son for a long moment, then picked up his phone and made a call. "I am bringing my son. We are opening the sealed memorandum from September 1997. There was a pause as the person on the other end presumably expressed shock or concern. Charles cut them off. "Just do it. Now." 20 minutes later, William and Charles stood in a climate-controlled vault deep beneath Buckingham Palace. The promises that were broken. William read the document 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of betrayal and broken trust. The promises were numbered and written in Charles's distinctive handwriting, each one dated and specific. Promise 1 began simply enough. "I vow to tell William and Harry the complete truth about the night their mother died, not the sanitized version. Literally everything I know about the circumstances, the security failures, the decisions made that night. And when they are old enough to understand, I will sit them down and answer every question they have with no lies and no omissions." William's hands clenched the paper tighter because that conversation never happened. Not when he turned 18. Not when he turned 21. Not ever. His father had only discussed Diana's death in vague terms over the years, always deflecting any specific questions and always maintaining the official narrative. Any attempt William or Harry had made to dig deeper had been shut down with claims that it was too painful to revisit or that they knew everything there was to know. But according to this, Charles had information he had deliberately withheld. What was this information? What details have been kept hidden so far? Promise 2 cuts even deeper. It reads, "I vow to support and maintain the relationship between William and Harry, no matter what conflicts arise between them. I will never take sides. I will never allow them to become estranged as I became estranged from my own siblings. Their mother wanted above all else for them to remain close. I will honor that wish even when it is difficult or inconvenient for me." William let out a bitter laugh that echoed right in the quiet vault. This promise had been shattered so completely that tea was almost funny to hear. Charles had absolutely taken sides during the breakdown of William and Harry's relationship. He had frozen Harry out and supported William's position as heir without question, and made no real effort to mediate or heal the rift between his sons. Diana's wish for her boys to stay united was discarded the moment it became politically inconvenient for the king. Promise 3 revealed something William had not known. It read, "I vow to ensure that Diana's voice and values remain central to how William and Harry are raised and how they conduct themselves as royals. I will not allow the institution to erase her influence or dismiss her approach to royal duty." Not when he turned 18, not when he turned 21, not ever. His father had only discussed Diana's death in vague terms over the years, always deflecting any specific questions and always maintaining the official narrative. Any attempt William or Harry had made to dig deeper had been shut down with claims that it was too painful to revisit or that they knew everything there was to know. But according to this, Charles had information he had deliberately withheld. What was this information? What details have been kept hidden so far? Promise 2 cuts even deeper. It reads, "I vow to support and maintain the relationship between William and Harry, no matter what conflicts arise between them. I will never take sides. I will never allow them to become estranged as I became estranged from my own siblings. Their mother wanted above all else for them to remain close. I will honor that wish even when it is difficult or inconvenient for me." William let out a bitter laugh that echoed right in the quiet vault. This promise had been shattered so completely that tea was almost funny to hear. Charles had absolutely taken sides during the breakdown of William and Harry's relationship. He had frozen Harry out and supported William's position as heir without question, and made no real effort to mediate or heal the rift between his sons. Diana's wish for her boys to stay united was discarded the moment it became politically inconvenient for the king. Promise 3 revealed something William had not known. It read, "I vow to ensure that Diana's voice and values remain central to how William and Harry are raised and how they conduct themselves as royals. I will not allow the institution to erase her influence or dismiss her approach to royal duty. She changed this family for the better, and I will make sure that change is permanent, not reversed after her death." William thought about his childhood after his mother died, and how the warmth and accessibility she had brought to royal life had gradually been stripped away, how he had been pushed toward tradition and formality and away from his mother's more personal, emotional approach to connecting with people. Catherine had helped him reclaim some of that, but it had been despite the institution, not because of it. His father had allowed Diana's influence to be systematically erased from the picture. Promise 4 was the most explosive. "I vow to reveal to William and Harry, when they are adults, the full truth about my relationship with their mother, the affairs and the timeline of when my relationship with Camilla resumed, the pressures from the institution that contributed to the breakdown of our marriage. They deserve to know that their mother was not blameless, but neither was I. They deserve the complete picture so they can make their own judgments without the distortion of public speculation and tabloid lies." William's jaw tightened this time. This was the promise that hurt most. Because he had spent years piecing together his own understanding of his parents' marriage from fragments, rumors, and media reports, he had never gotten the truth from his father directly. He had never been sat down and given an honest accounting of what truly happened. Instead, he had been left to piece together a narrative from many unreliable sources and was never quite sure what was real and what was fiction. There were other promises, smaller but still significant. Charles had also vowed to protect certain aspects of Diana's legacy from any institutional interference. He vowed to maintain his relationships with Diana's family, particularly her brother and sisters, even when it was awkward. He vowed to ensure that both sons had access to their mother's personal belongings and letters, items that would help them understand who she really was beyond being the public icon. Each promise, William realized as he read, had been broken or ignored not necessarily with malice, but through the slow erosion of good intentions under the weight of time, duty, and personal comfort. William finally looked up from the pages with his face masked with controlled rage. "When were you planning to honor any of this?" Charles met his son's gaze and for the first time looked genuinely ashamed, so he said, "I intended to at first, I truly did. But then time passed and it became easier to leave things alone and not to reopen wounds, to maintain the version of events that everyone had accepted." William's voice was cold and sharp. "You mean it became easier for you? More convenient and less uncomfortable?" Charles flinched but did not argue. "Perhaps that is true. I am not proud of it. But I convinced myself that protecting you both from painful truths was the compassionate choice." William stood abruptly as the chair scraped loudly across the floor. "You convinced yourself of a lie, and now I have to decide what to do with this." Charles became pale. "What do you mean?" William held up the pages. "These promises were witnessed, so they are more than just private thoughts. They are a matter of record, and that means I could make them public. I could tell the world that the king swore an oath beside my mother's coffin and then broke every part of it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Charles seemed to age 10 years in that moment. "You would destroy me." But William's response was quiet and devastating. "You destroyed these promises. I am just considering whether the world deserves to know that." Charles sank into a chair with his head in his hands. "What do you want from me, William? An apology? Public humiliation?" William sat back down as his anger gave way to exhaustion. "I want the final and complete truth. I want you to fulfill these promises, even if it is decades late. I want to know everything you vowed to tell me about Mom's death. I want to understand what really happened in your marriage. And most of all, I want your help fixing what you allowed to break between me and Harry." Charles looked up and responded, "Some of those promises may be impossible to keep now. Too much time has passed, and much damage has been done." William nodded slowly before replying, "Then we start with what is possible, and we accept that some damage may be permanent, but I will not let this document go back into that vault and be forgotten for another 27 years. You made these vows. Now live up to them, or admit you cannot." The truth about that night. The first promise of telling William the complete truth about the night Diana died was no doubt the hardest. They met again 3 days later, this time at Highgrove, away from any staff and official residences, in a place where they could speak without fear of being overheard. Charles had brought files with him, documents he had kept private all these years. Charles began slowly, with his voice heavy with a grief that had never fully healed. "Your mother called me that night, hours before the crash. You did not know that, did you?" William shook his head, his throat visibly tight this time. "She was in Paris with Dodie, and she was angry. Not at me specifically, but at the situation as a whole. The paparazzi had been relentless, and she was feeling hunted. She told me she was going to do something dramatic to get away from them. I told her to be careful and to let her security team do their job. She laughed and said her security team was the problem, and that she just wanted one night of freedom." William listened carefully, his hands gripped so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "And you never told anyone this?" Charles shook his head. "I told the investigators, but they deemed it irrelevant to the inquiry. It did not change the facts of what happened, but it has haunted me ever since because I wonder if I should have said something different. If I should have insisted she come home immediately, and if I could have prevented what happened next." Charles opened one of the files and showed William the security reports from that night as well. They detailed the chaos, lack of coordination, and the decision to use a driver who had been drinking. But they also revealed something more disturbing. Diana's regular protection officers had been dismissed weeks earlier at her own request. She wanted more privacy and less oversight. The substitutes brought in were unfortunately less experienced and less assertive. They had tried to advise against certain decisions that night but had been overruled. The palace had been aware of these security weaknesses but had not intervened because Diana was no longer officially part of the royal family. Prince William absorbed this information in silence, even as his mind worked through implications he had never considered. So you are saying she made choices that put herself at risk, but you also allowed her to be in a position where she could make those choices without proper protection. Charles nodded miserably. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. We were all responsible in different ways. She wanted freedom, I wanted distance. The institution wanted to forget she existed, and together all of those desires created a situation where she was vulnerable. William's anger flared again. And you never thought we deserved to know this? Was letting us believe it was just a tragic accident better than explaining the complexity of what actually happened? Charles pulled out another document, this one a transcript of a phone call Diana had with her brother just days before her death. In it, she expressed fears about her safety. Not paranoia, but legitimate concerns based on experiences she had been having. Strange cars are following her. She felt like her movements were being monitored. She had reported these concerns to the police, but nothing had come of it. The palace had been informed, but had dismissed it as Diana being dramatic. Charles's voice cracked as he explained, "I did not take her fears seriously enough, none of us did. And then she died, and those fears looked prescient, and I had to live with the knowledge that I had failed to protect her even after our marriage ended." William stood and walked to the window, his back to his father, trying to process everything he was learning. This was not a simple story of a car crash caused by paparazzi. This was a cascading series of failures, choices, and negligence that had created the conditions for tragedy. His mother had been let down by everyone who should have kept her safe, including his father. After a long silence, William asked the question that had haunted him for years. "Do you think it was just an accident, or do you think someone wanted her dead?" Charles answered carefully. The official investigations concluded it was an accident. Excessive speed, alcohol, lack of seatbelts, paparazzi pursuit, all contributing factors. But do I think there were people who would have benefited from her death? Yes. Do I think the security failures were entirely accidental? I have doubts. Can I prove anything beyond the official findings? No. It was not the answer William wanted, but it was honest, and even more honest than anything his father had told him before. They talked for hours that day, going through every document, every timeline, every detail that Charles had kept hidden. By the end, William did not have complete closure, but he had something he had never had before. As the sun set and they prepared to part ways, William asked one final question. "Why did you keep all this from us? Why let us grow up not knowing?" Charles's answer was simple and heartbreaking. "I was afraid that if you knew the whole truth, you would hate me for my part in it. And I could not bear that. So I stayed silent and told myself it was for your protection when really it was for mine." William did not respond to that. Instead, he gathered the documents Charles had shown him and prepared to leave. Before he walked out, he turned back. "You owe Harry this same conversation. Everything you just told me he deserves to hear. Will you do that? The brother he lost?" The second promise Charles had broken was about keeping William and Harry together, and fixing that would require more than just telling the truth. It would require action, mediation, and a willingness to confront the painful reality of how broken things had become. William had not spoken to Harry in over 8 months. Their last conversation had ended badly, with accusations and hurt feelings that had only deepened the divide. Harry was living in California, building a life completely separate from the royal family, and seemed to have no interest in reconciliation. But the Coffin Promise had been clear, and Charles had vowed to keep his sons united no matter what, and William intended to hold his father to that, even if it meant forcing a conversation nobody wanted to have. He told his father plainly, "You promised, Mom, you would not let us become estranged, but you have done nothing to prevent that. Now you need to fix it." Charles protested. "Harry lives on another continent. He has made their choices, and I cannot force them to come back home." William's response was sharp. "You are the king. You have resources, influence, and the ability to bring people together if you actually try. So try or admit the promise meant nothing to you after all." Reluctantly, King Charles agreed to reach out to his son Harry. The initial contact was awkward, with Harry suspicious about why his father was suddenly interested in playing peacemaker. But when Charles explained that William had unsealed a secret and was insisting that the family honor it, Harry's attitude shifted immediately. He agreed to a meeting, but only on neutral ground, away from palace officials and the media, somewhere they could speak honestly without the media over them. They settled on a private estate in Scotland. The meeting was scheduled for next weekend. William arrived first, as his anxiety was evident despite his attempts to appear calm. Charles came next, looking older and more tired than William had seen him in days. And finally, Harry arrived with his guarded and defensive expression, clearly uncertain about what he was walking into. They sat in a room with a fireplace, as it was the only warmth against the cold Scottish weather, and for several minutes, nobody spoke. The silence was thick with years of hurt, misunderstanding, and anger that had hardened into something permanent. Charles began. "I asked you both here because I made promises when your mother died. Promises I have not kept. And William has rightfully called me out for that failure. One of those promises was that I would never allow you two to become estranged. That I would do everything in my power to keep you together, because that is what she wanted more than anything." In all of these, Harry's expression remained closed, so their father continued, "And yet here we are, estranged. So what exactly are you planning to do about it now?" Charles looked between his sons. "I am planning to be completely honest about my failures and about the ways I contributed to this divide, and then I am going to step back and let you two talk without me interfering." What followed was the most emotionally raw conversation the three of them had ever had. Charles admitted that he had somehow favored William because William was the heir, and that favoritism had bred resentment in Harry. He admitted he had not protected Harry from institutional pressures as he should have. He also admitted that he had allowed the palace politics to drive wedges between his sons because it was easier than fighting the system. Each of the king's admissions was painful, dragging out into the open wounds that had been festering for years. When King Charles finished, he stood and walked to the door. "I will leave you two alone now," he said. "You need to talk without me here, but before I go, I want you both to know something. Your mother loved you both equally and fiercely. She would be heartbroken by this division. And so am I. Whatever anger you have toward each other or toward me, do not let it destroy what you once had." He left, closing the door quietly behind him, leaving William and Harry alone for the first time in over a year. The silence immediately stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Harry spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you remember when we were kids and Mom used to make us promise we would always have each other's backs?" William nodded, his eyes damp. "Every night before bed. No matter what happens, you two stick together." Harry laughed bitterly. "We really failed at that, didn't we?" William looked at his brother, really looked at him, seeing past the anger and defensiveness to the person he had grown up with. "We did, but maybe it is not too late to fix it." They talked for hours, going through grievances and misunderstandings that had piled up over the years. Harry expressed his frustration at always being the spare, the afterthought, and the one whose life was considered less important. William admitted he had not understood the pressure. Harry felt because his own role had been so clearly defined from birth. Harry talked about feeling abandoned when William married and started his own family, about feeling as if he had lost his only true ally. William confessed that he had resented Harry for leaving and for choosing his own happiness over duty, even though part of him admired that courage. The conversation was not easy, and when Charles returned hours later, he found his sons sitting together, not exactly relaxed, but no longer hostile. However, the tension had shifted into something more serious by the time Prince William started talking. The unsealing that changed everything. William made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He was going to make the Coffin Promise public, not the entire document, as certain parts were too personal and too painful to share. However, the core of it and the promises Charles had made about truth and family and honoring Diana's legacy, those would be revealed. King Charles himself begged William to reconsider, but William was adamant. These promises were made in Diana's name, and the public who loved her deserves to know they existed, and that we are finally honoring them. The announcement was carefully planned as he sat in the same chair where he had recorded his previous emotional statement, the one about mental health and the woman named Rose. But this time his demeanor was different, more resolved and less broken. He began speaking with quiet intensity. "I want to tell you about a document that was sealed 27 years ago, and a promise my father made beside my mother's coffin, a promise that was witnessed, locked away, and largely forgotten until recently." He explained how he had discovered it, how he had forced its unsealing, and what he had found inside. He talked about the promises regarding the truth about his mother's death, about keeping him and Harry together, and about honoring their mother's values. And he talked about how those promises had been broken over time. But William did not use the statement to attack his father, the king. Instead, he spoke with measured compassion about how grief, time, and institutional pressure had caused those promises to fade. He further explained that his purpose in revealing this was not to shame anyone, but to finally honor what should have been honored all along. "My father made those promises with the best intentions. Life made keeping them harder than he anticipated. But now, together, we are working to fulfill them, even though it is decades late." William went on to address Harry directly in the statement, which surprised those watching. "My brother and I have been estranged for far too long. Our mother would hate what has become of our relationship. Thanks to the Coffin Promise, we are finally addressing that, talking again and working through years of hurt. It will take time, we know, but we are committed to honoring what our mother wanted for us, unity and mutual support. I hope the public will give us the space to do that privately, while knowing that we are making genuine efforts." Charles issued his own statement shortly after William's, a brief but heartfelt apology. "I made promises I did not keep, and I allowed time and circumstance to erode commitments I should have held sacred. My son was right to force me to confront this failure. I am grateful for his courage and his determination to honor his mother's memory properly. We are a family trying to heal old wounds and do better moving forward. I ask for understanding as we navigate this process." They left flowers and walked away together, not as a perfect family, but as a healing one. The work honoring Diana's memory and wishes was finally and genuinely underway. It was messy and complicated and would probably never be fully resolved. But it was real, and that, William thought as he looked at his brother and father beside him, was what mattered most. There it is, the secret that was buried for nearly 3 decades and the promises that changed a family forever. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for the royal stories nobody else will tell you. More truth coming soon. See you in the next video.